This technique works whether your fabric was hand knitted, loom knitted, or machine knitted. There are a number of reasons you might need to know how to do it. In this case, I made the sweater pieces on a loom that was not wide enough to make the whole sweater front or back or even the sleeve. So the sleeve was made in 2 panels and the front was made in 3 panels. The back was made the same as the front. Wherever you see a dotted line, that's where the seam takes place, and it's really hard to spot. Here's a close-up. On this part, there's a seam here also. It's just hard to see. Here my orange yarn is threaded through one of the strands of yarn that we'll be seaming with. And here I'm going up the work, trying to indicate what we'll look for. What we're doing is going under the top of a stitch. You can see the arch it forms. And we are skipping the very outer column of stitches and looking for the strands of yarn that represent the top arch of the next column of stitches. I'm giving you several different looks before I actually start seaming, because at times my hands will unavoidably get in the way of your view. Under one on the right, pull snug. Under the one on the left, pull snug. The edge column of stitches that we're skipping disappears into the back of the seam. It will show on the inside of the garment, but not on the outside. This is very easy stuff, really. There are a couple of techniques to keep in mind. My fabric is not rolling very much because it's quite bulky, but the finer it is and the less fuzzy, the more it will tend to roll, and you'll need to use the thumb on your hand that is not doing the sewing to keep the edge of the fabric unrolled. It's also important to take your time and not miss any stitches, because that would cause the seam to be misaligned. Another important thing to keep in mind is the tension at which you tighten your stitches. If you pull too tightly, as I just did on purpose, it will make the seam inflexible and the garment won't hang well, even if it's not enough to bunch it up. So periodically make sure that while you need to get good contact, you don't have overly tight stitches. To explain a little bit about this project and why I need to seam from the purl side. The purl is forming the background fabric for some knit stitches that are forming the cables. So while knit stitches will be very prominent on the finished garment, it's the purls that I need to seam together. Right now I'm joining 2 halves of a sleeve. One other note, machine knitters normally don't slip the edge stitch, so they can just knit normally. But very often, both hand and loom knitters do slip a stitch at the beginning of a row. I don't recommend it when you want to seam like this. The stitches align better if you knit every one. Here the seam is partly finished, and you can see that I don't have any ribbing at the wrist yet. That's because I used Afterthought ribbing, and I will explain how and why to do that in another movie. There will be a link for you in the program notes.